So what steps should be taken in your retirement planning? I'm going to give you a step-by-step way of what to actually plan for to be able to get to there, not just at some point, but even faster. Okay, so there's a lot of things to consider when you're trying to create a step-by-step plan. When you're trying to create that retirement plan, what are the steps to take? Well, we got to know what point A is, and we got to know what point Z is, right? We got to know what the difference is. Here, I'm going to talk about what's that step-by-step process. What is it you can actually do? What are your dreams and goals? What are you trying to accomplish? All those things we got to figure out in order for you to be able to hit not just these retirement goals, but more likely your dream life. How do we really accomplish that? And can we do it even sooner than in your 60s and 70s? That's what we can cover right now. All right, so first and foremost, the one thing you gotta know is what is your end goal, right? Obviously, we gotta know where point A is, where are we currently, right? And if you don't know where you are currently with your money, that's a good start, right? At least know where you are right now, but then also know where you need to go. And this one's confusing for a lot of people, because I remember asking this when I used to be the traditional salesman in a suit, AKA financial advisor, right? I would talk to people and I would say, well, how much money do you want in retirement? And the answer would always be, well, how much can I have? How much, as much as I can get. Well, obviously, but how much do you think you need? Even though I know you're not a fortune teller, you have no clue what your life's going to be like down the road. But if you're just to make a wild guess, because we're just talking about hypotheticals, and by the way, my returns are hypothetical too, and so is inflation is hypothetical. In fact, everything about this is hypothetical. That's just why you have to meet with me every single year to talk about our hypotheticals to see if you'll ever hypothetically ever retire, right? That's pretty much what it was like. By the way, if you've met with financial advisors, that's exactly what it's like, and that's reality, not hypothetically. So anyways, as we're talking about this, you got to know where point Z is. I wouldn't just focus on the money goal. Yes, that can be great, right? If you have a basic income of what you want now, you could still try to plan for that down the road. For example, I used to think 20 years ago, $5,000 a month would be amazing. I was like, if I could have $60,000 a year coming in without me working for it, oh my gosh, I'll be set for life. So I remember setting that goal. If I can do that by the time I'm in my 40s, oh yeah. And then of course what happens? It's called inflation. $5,000 a month is not like, the way I picture $5,000 a month, it's kind of like picturing $12,000 to $15,000 today, right, per month. You're definitely more comfortable there. And even then people might say, even $12,000 to $15,000 a month, depending on my situation and circumstance, the amount of things I want to do in retirement, I don't know. It may or may not be enough. Because for example, is your plan in retirement to just sit on your front porch swing, drinking Country Time lemonade that you bought from Costco in bulk because that was the cheapest way to get it? And even then, you're just adding extra water. You're trying to only do half scoop instead of full scoop. Plus, it's good for your blood sugar if you do it that way anyways, right? So you're trying to do all these kind of things, and you're trying to just not travel anywhere, not use up gas. It would be like my grandmother. Like my grandmother was the sweetest old lady. She was the kind of lady that would apologize if she even said poop. She said poop. She apologized. Oh, sorry, I swore. It got worse when she was more senile. Then she just started dropping F-bombs left and right. But for her, she was the sweetest old lady, and she was living on that, I kid you not, a $666 a month Social Security check. Just so you know, Social Security is like getting payments from the devil, and she was kind of getting that, right? So anyways, so she was getting that $666 a month. She would only do 2 things every week. Besides watch her programs, when she watched rodeo or her Chicago Cubs, because she had WGN, that was the only thing she could watch with baseball. There was Atlanta Braves, I guess. But, she always sang with Harry Carey and stuff, and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, she would go to the grocery store once per week. She would drive literally 2 miles into town. I think it was about a 3 or 4 mile round trip to go to the grocery store. And then she would buy $5 of lottery tickets. And then she would go play bingo one night per week. That was it. That was her life. She wouldn't go see us because that was too much in gas. We'd have to go pick her up and then bring her to our house, right? That was her life. She figured out how to make it work, right? She had a very simple life. But is that the life you dream of for yourself? Are you the one that's going to be sitting on that front porch because you can't afford to go anywhere? Or do you want to be able to see your kids or your grandkids, even if they move all the way across country or across the world? Do you want to be able to have the freedom to do that? Do you want the freedom to be able to cover any health needs that might be coming up? Because health expenses are the number one expense you're going to have in retirement. What are you going to do if that comes up? Because there's only so much will get covered by the government, right? They can only cover so much. And even then, do we even trust the government will be able to cover everything for so long? Because they keep pumping out money that they can't even pay for themselves. They're going majorly in debt. And for you, you might have to be as well. And if you get that paid off house, then you realize you got to either sell that house or do a reverse mortgage, right? And things like that. It's just miserable when you think about that step-by-step type of thing. And so, instead, you got to figure out what's the kind of life that I want? How much freedom do I want? That might determine what kind of money you need and also buy when you need to buy. Here's the other thing you're looking at too. What kind of vehicle will help you get there? Once you determine point Z, right, or Z for our neighbors up north, right? Once you determine that, what's the next thing you got to do, right? Where do we put our money? The vehicle has to match it. For example, if you're trying to retire in your 60s, the 401ks, the IRAs, the Roth IRAs work great. But what if you want to retire sooner? What if you want to hit those financial goals by your 40s, 30s even, your 50s, whatever it might be? Well, those vehicles don't work. That's like me trying to drive to Paris, France right now. I can tell you, I can only go across the Atlantic Ocean so far in my car before it starts sinking. I don't care if it's a Japanese car or not, it's not going to make it there. You've got to have the right vehicle to get you to the right places. So then you got to decide the vehicle to get you there. I'll tell you this much, and even for people who want to retire in their 60s, many times we start going away from the 401ks and the IRAs because one, they don't return you that much money anyways. But then two, again, if you want to have that flexibility to do what you want with that money and not have to worry about ultra taxes, because then you still have to pay taxes on some of the money, unless it's a Roth IRA, but even then you can't stuff that much money in a Roth IRA. You got to do something. There could be alternative investments. That's where we talk about things like doing real estate investing, things that actually create passive income, right now. That's the beauty of it, right? You know, for example, I had one client where they were looking at trying to figure out how to get where they wanted to go. For them, they're actually in their early 40s. They said, I want to be able to live an expat life. I want to be able to live in a foreign country, homeschool our kids, give them a whole nother experience they'll never get from public school. Well, we said, all right, let's figure that out. I said, well, based on what you're doing here, your retirement accounts are pretty much useless because they won't help you do anything for the next 20 years. So what if we got the money away from there? Could we move that money out? 2020 was awesome because 2020, they actually allowed us to pull out $100,000 and then have no penalty, but then split taxes over 3 years. It was a beautiful moment. I mean, I can tell you, our clients were like cashing out IRAs and 401ks like that. But on top of that, we said, well, you got this house. What if we sold your house? Especially if you're going to live in another country. Get all the equity out of your house. Get it out of that prison. And then that money starts producing more income. Guess what, guys? They're making over $3,500 a month using the money they used from the sale of their house, plus a little bit of retirement money they had anyways, and that also kept an extra cash reserve buffer just in case to keep themselves going. So guys, they created this opportunity for them to retire much faster, living the life that they were designed to do. Living in Cabo San Lucas, right? Living in Mexico, doing homeschool with their kids, coming back to the States to visit family and doing those things, being free to do what they want to do. They still will work a little bit part-time on a part-time business, but they've got the freedom to do whatever the heck they want and live wherever they want. Isn't that the dream for you too? So anyways, guys, I mean, there's so many ways you can do it, but remember, when you're trying to plan this, it's got to be done in that order. You got to know where you are, where you're going, and then what's the best vehicle to get you there, and especially if it can get you there even faster than doing traditional retirement plans that haven't worked for financial advisors for years anyways. All right, so as I mentioned, A to Z, right? And you got to have the right vehicle to get you there. Now, here's the other thing, and this is hard to plan. I wish I had a crystal ball, and I'm sure you do too, right? It'd be so much easier in life if we know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe it'd be scary, maybe it wouldn't be. But it'd be so much nicer, but we don't. We don't know what's going to happen. Because you might be trying to plan for this someday retirement, right? Hey, if I just put away money, if I sacrifice now, then someday I'm going to have that life. I'll tell you, one of the biggest problems and challenges I have with traditional retirement plans is that they lock your money away from you in prison, right? They lock away in that 401k, and you can only get to it if you get fired or change jobs. Not a recommendation, by the way, on this channel. I don't recommend you try to get yourself fired so you can finally get to your money in your 401k. Even if you did, if you're not 59.5, you get a 10% penalty and taxes on it, unless you're so broke you can actually waive the 10% penalty. There are ways to do that. But I don't recommend that. But you're always taught to lock your money up in prison by all these financial advisors and experts, right? Throw your money in the 401ks and IRAs, leave it in there, set it and forget it, let it lock away forever. Oh, and by the way, pay off your house. And so pay off all your debt, including your house, throw all the money in that, so then the money's trapped in there. The problem is this, guys, is that we've had so many clients come to us that are asset rich and cash poor. They have all this money, they might even have millions of dollars, and yet they have no passive income. And on top of that, guys, when you try to delay for someday, what if someday never comes? You know, I had a client recently, I've actually had a few clients just in the last year pass away. One of them was 39 years old. He was a dentist. He was living his life, you know, doing his thing. He was working hard in his business, his practice. He was actually getting ready to sell the practice. He was starting to get ready to launch. Unfortunately, he did pass away, you know, and it was devastating for his wife and his family. It was soul crushing, you know. It was really hard to just try to help her. She's like, I'm so overwhelmed. Like, we had to like fill out paperwork for her just so she could just sign it, because she could barely even sign her own name. She was so emotionally distraught from this happening. Because who expects, you know, a family member to pass away when they're not even 40 years old yet? Well, that's what happened with him, guys. What I'm so grateful for is that the last few years of his life, he bought more of his time back because we didn't just set it and forget it. We actually got him creating passive income right now. And from that, he was able to take a little bit more time off of the practice. He was able to have more of his life to enjoy. And as a result, guys, he had that time with that family. Even though you never know how much time you have left on this planet. They always say, the best time to start is right now. And that's true. But it's also best to get that cash flow and passive income coming in right now, because you never know. You never know how long you're going to be on this planet. I hope I'll be here next month. I hope I'll be here to do more videos for you. But there's no guarantees in life, right? That's why we got to make sure that this works for you and that you stop working so hard for all this money, but instead get the money to work harder for you so that you become work optional. You work because you want to, not because you have to. If you want to figure out how to do that, go to moneyripples.com, try that passive income calculator to see what's possible in your life, not 30 or 40 years from now, but right now. Click on that at moneyripples.com today.